Breaking tonight, Fox News can confirm that White House counsel Don McGann was one of 3 senior Trump administration officials who tried to keep the Attorney General, Sessions, from recusing himself in the Russia inquiry. The other officials included former Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and former Press Secretary Sean Spicer. However, Sean Spicer is now telling us this evening that that is not the case. Still, this contradicts a blistering New York Times piece that claimed that the president was the one who personally lobbied to get Sessions to stay on the case to protect him from charges. Here now on this and other things related, J. Christian Adams, former Justice Department attorney. Good to see you tonight. Thank you very much for being here. You know, in and of itself, regardless of what happened, there's a couple different stories here. Whether Don McGann was the one who went to Sessions and said, you know, we really don't want you to recuse yourself, and whether these other individuals were involved. Is there anything wrong with that inherently?
Absolutely not. Don McGann didn't do anything wrong. There's a lot of reasons why, Martha, but among them are the fact that Jeff Sessions wasn't implicated in anything relating to the theory of this Russian investigation. It wasn't alleged that he was involved, that he directed it, that he knew about it. He just happened to be in the same building without any specific information. So Don McGann was doing absolutely nothing wrong by urging him to stay on the case, something I believe he should have. He would do a much better job of keeping Mueller from going out of control than Rod Rosenstein is doing as the deputy.
Yeah, you know, it doesn't seem to me that the attorney for the president going to the attorney general and saying, these are the reasons why we think there's a legal case for you to not make this decision, you know, that seems to be, in my mind, just looking at it, a fairly appropriate role. And, you know, when you add to that the fact that Jeff Sessions didn't listen to them. You know, I mean, he listened to their case. They made their case. Whether it was one of them or 3 of them, or even if the president also suggested it, we know his feelings are pretty well known on the subject. You know, Jeff Sessions decided not to go that route and went his own way. So it's not like he was, you know, pigeonholed into doing something he didn't want to do.
Well, that's right. But the question is, Martha, what is the scope of the recusal? I mean, if it related to an investigation involving Russia, that's one thing. But so far we've seen from Mueller that this investigation involves such earth-shattering events like Paul Manafort laundering money through an Alexandria, Virginia rug store, or Mike Flynn not telling the truth on a question, which is it's sort of a gotcha law, 18 U.S.C. 1001. So far, it doesn't have anything to do with Russia. And so it really raises questions as to why Jeff Sessions is not involved, why he's not making sure that they turn documents over to Congress regarding how they relied on the phony dossier. There's all kinds of questions that seemingly only Jeff Sessions could fix.
Yeah. You know, in terms of the broader investigation, there's a feeling now that Trump allies are pushing these other investigations, reopening the Hillary Clinton case and the like, and trying to downplay this Russia probe. And there's a battle going on between Republicans and Democrats on the Hill over whether or not they think that that's proper. What do you think?
Well, right. Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate today, called for a closer look at the Hillary matters. But, Martha, there's a reason for this. There's a growing perception in the country that the Justice Department is biased, that law enforcement is based on who you are, what your party is, who you agree with politically. And when you learn the details of what happened in the campaign, where the dossier, this phony, insane dossier, was possibly being used by FBI officials to do national security surveillance on Americans and then unmasking the surveillance, it becomes a frightening story instead of a ridiculous one. And I think Congress is onto it, and that's why people like Holder and Comey are so nervous, because the bad behavior last year during the election is really a frightening one.
Yeah. You know, with regards to the relationship of the Attorney General to the President, this is something that you saw firsthand in the prior administration when you were seeing things that were going on that you didn't like. There's a lot of sort of, I don't know, hysteria is too strong a word, but concern about whether or not the president should be protected by the Attorney General. I just want to put up a quote from Eric Holder in terms of the way he spoke of his relationship with President Obama. When asked if he was going to be leaving the administration, he said, well, I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. There's still work to be done. I'm still the president's wingman, so I'm there with my boy. So we'll see. What do you think?
Great find by your producers. That's a perfect example of the lawless sort of political allegiance between Holder and Obama that led to all sorts of outrages, Fast and Furious, the city of Ferguson being lit on fire because Holder stoked a mob there that echoed the president's views on police. I mean, look, we had a situation where Holder was running interference all the time for Barack Obama, and now suddenly, when Jeff Sessions isn't even doing it, when it's only suggested that he ought to, people like Holder and Comey and the rest of them go completely crazy. It shows you the bias that we're talking about. People are not treated the same way by this Justice Department, and the institution of the Justice Department, the sort of insiders, treat people differently based on their political allegiance, and that's what we're learning.
Christian Adams, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight.